Right, let's get going. Today's workshop on enhancing evaluations is being run by someone who's been a Toastmaster for 13 years. She's currently a member of Hutt Valley Toastmasters and Silverstream Toastmasters. She is also the District 72 trainer. She won the 2019 District 72 evaluation contest. She's made district final and table topics a number of times as well. Please welcome Distinguished Toastmaster Helen Cartmel.
Thank you, Neville. And Neville, could we have the next slide, please? First of all, just to let you say that this is a personal take on evaluations. And I know that there are some very eminent Toastmasters in the room, and certainly at least one person has also won Alan Chisholm, the district evaluation contest. So we've got some real expertise. I change my views about how to evaluate fairly regularly. So this is basically where I'm at the moment, but hopefully you'll get some useful information out of it. Quickly, the agenda. You'll see on here that we're going to have a break for 10 minutes after we've looked at a little bit about Zoom, how to prepare evaluations, and then we're going to move on to a structure and perhaps something that might help you really get a grip on, well, what do I evaluate when I hear a speech? How can I actually find a way in to evaluate this speech? And I'm going to finish up by just refreshing people's memories about how we score or use the criteria in pathways. Can we have the next slide, please, Neville? I'd like to acknowledge Neville, who's going to be doing the technical support today, and I think everybody knows Neville, so thank you, Neville, for taking that responsibility on board. It's not the most straightforward thing to do, manage the technical support in a Zoom meeting, but Neville's doing a fabulous job at the moment. And could we have the next slide, please? Okay, so I have got a handout at the end of the session. If anybody wants it, I will give you my email address and you can email me and ask for it, but I'm going to leave it up to you to take the initiative there. And could we have the next slide, please, Neville? All right. How many people, hopefully everybody can use chat. If you can't use chat, at the very bottom of your screen, there's a little speech bubble. The word chat. If you click on there, you can type a message. And make sure you've selected everyone in meeting. Then can you have it just type a quick message so that I can check that people can use chat. Brilliant. I've got a few coming through. It doesn't have to be very much. Fantastic. Hi, Wendy and Hamilton. That's really awesome. So we're going to be using chat quite a bit. We're also going, oh, hello, Neil. Neil's here. We're going to be also using the opportunity. I'm giving you the opportunity to speak. However, it's not going to be a case of just putting your hand up on the screen, which a lot of people think is the best way of getting attention. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see participants. And if you click on participants and open it up, there should be, and I can't see it on mine, but there should be on your screen, a blue hand amongst a range of little icons. And if you click on the blue hand, I can see then that you are wanting to speak. So Rose has raised her hand and so on. People have raised their hands. And that's an indication that you want to speak. Now, I'm going to ask Neville to monitor hand raising so that we can have people speaking easily if they want to. I'm also going to be asking people, as I see messages roll through chat, I will be asking individuals to contribute. So I may just say, Wendy, could you share that idea in a bit more detail? At that point, could you unmute yourself, please? And then share your ideas. There is a maximum time of 2 minutes. It's a bit like a mini table topic, just so that we can maximize the amount of time people talk for. And after that, Neville has got the power. And if you go longer than about 2 minutes, Neville will mute you. Okay, he will love doing that, I am absolutely sure. So that's how we're going to operate this session. I'm now going to ask Neville to move on to the next slide and the slide after. Oh, we'll leave that one, Neville. That's the old PowerPoint. We're not going to use annotations. Next one. Next one. Talked about that. Right. Thank you. What I'd like to know from you is what you're hoping to find out and learn today. And if you can write your comments in chat, that would be fantastic. And we will be recording the chat as we go. So any ideas and suggestions about what you want to get today, chat please. Right, Jennifer's refreshing her evaluation skills. Really good one, Jennifer. We can always refresh our evaluation skills. Yep, new ideas, reminders, different ideas, difference between traditional and pathways. That's a good one, Alan, because I focus now on the pathways terminology. Tips to help club members strengthen. Yeah, it's a really good idea if you take away ideas to share them, because there's nothing like sharing ideas to help others. Hopefully things I can apply at work as well as Toastmasters. That's a possibility. So we've got some very good ideas there. Constructive feedback, improve my feedback skills. Some really lovely ideas there, and hopefully we will deliver some of those today. Neville, please could we have the next slide? Okay. Can I just remind people that if you're not speaking, to put yourself on mute so that we don't get background interruption? Thank you. I'm going to ask you now to think about what makes an excellent evaluation. This is a personal view. It's not, there's no prescribed excellence in evaluations in terms of Toastmasters that I know of, but it's quite a broad church, if you like. If you can put your responses in chat, then that would be really good, and everybody can see what you think makes an excellent evaluation. Yeah, recommendations, and the evaluator provides examples and demos it. Thank you, Wendy. Definitely demonstrations. Growth points for the speaker. Thank you, Alan. Some excellent ideas there. Definitely growth points. Neville's what I saw, what I heard, what I felt. That's always useful to include. Give the recipient material he can use to improve the speech. Absolutely. We're all here to learn, and people want to learn how to improve the speech. Yep, something tangible. That's a really good word. Thank you, Amy. Something tangible you can go away and apply next time. Feedback including praise. Thank you, Jennifer. I think that's really important, that people feel motivated by the evaluation. They don't feel as though, oh, I've just, it was just terrible. There needs to be something in there that keeps people going, gives them a lift and gives them a boost. So we've got some interesting suggestions there about excellence in evaluations, and they're all really useful. Broad and general, but there are some specifics. Neville, please could we have the next slide? We're now going to get down to the nitty-gritty about evaluations. And I'm going to start asking a few people more questions. But first of all, we're going to focus on what people have done well. And I've put down here done well because the pathways criteria doesn't talk about commendations. It talks about what worked well in an evaluation. We're moving away from the old terminology of commend, recommend, commend, although I think that that still works as a structure. But I tend to talk in my evaluations now about what worked well and perhaps areas for improvement, what the speaker could work on. So it is a change in terminology. But I'd like you to think about, what does a speaker want to know, and the audience, because we are addressing an audience when we give an evaluation as well as the speaker. What do they want to know about what they've done well? And if you pop your responses in chat, I'm going to ask one or two people to give us more information. Yeah, what you liked. Thank you, Jennifer, and why. Wendy, speaker met the objectives. I'll ask you in a minute, Wendy, a bit more about that. Amy, why something really, thank you, Amy, why something worked well in this speech, so that they know when and how to use the same techniques in future. Yeah, Neil, the message of the speech. I'm going to ask 3 people to share. So I'm going to start with Wendy. Wendy, could you unmute yourself, please? And could you explain your comment about the speaker meet the project objectives?
The reason why I mentioned that, Helen, is VP Ed, and I'm a member of a number of clubs. I see people delivering pathway speeches, but they haven't read the project and they've just delivered a speech. So I'm a little bit particular now about making sure the evaluator has referred to the project objectives to give honest feedback to members.
Thank you. And when you look at the criteria and pathways, because a lot of it is general and pertinent to any speech, which criteria do you focus on?
I tend to look at the last part. So if I'm looking at researching and presenting on level 1, there's a evaluation criteria, the last box, that actually is all about the project. So in this case, it says well researched. So I'm looking particularly, has that been met?
Yeah. And that's really, really useful. I tend to focus on that last, it always is the last criteria. You've got the general criteria, clarity, vocal variety, and so on first, but the last criteria on the evaluation sheet is always the one that's pertinent to the purpose of the project. And that could be almost your entire focus sometimes of, you know, the evaluation, because it is the purpose of the project. So thank you, Wendy. Amy, I'm going to ask you to explain your why, because we're going to come on to that shortly.
Sure. When I'm being evaluated, whether it's for Toastmasters or whether I'm receiving feedback for some other reason, I want to know why I did something well, what worked well, and why the person felt that that was a good thing to do. Because the reason for having evaluations is to improve next time. So I want to know whether that's something I should keep next time, specifically what I should keep next time, or whether it was just a one-off thing that worked really well for this speech, but it's not really something that I could do in future.
I think that's a really good explanation. Thank you, Amy. For me, it's about the why, and that's that we're going to look at it later, but that's where the richness comes from in an evaluation. We're very good at talking about what worked. We're not so good at talking about why it worked. And I'm going to ask Neil to talk a little bit about the message of his speech. Neil, could you unmute yourself, please?
I think every speech has a message, whether it's to inform, etc. And sometimes, obviously, the message can be more subtle. At this moment, we're getting beaten up with a lot of messages from a large number of people in the political arena. But every speech has a purpose. We talk about the purpose of the speech, so therefore we have a message to apply to a speech. And sometimes the message may be just pure entertainment. But if we listen to, for instance, the speeches that we've heard in the humorous contests, some of them have used humour, obviously, to provide serious messages. So.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. And we're going to be looking a little bit at that later, because sometimes that's the way you get your handle on the evaluation, by if you can work out what the speech's purpose is and the message they're trying to put across, sometimes that's the way in to start composing your evaluation when you're thinking about it. So thank you, everybody. Could we have the next slide, please, Neville? We've got some feedback from Amy very quickly agreeing with Neil. She wants to know whether the audience received the same message that she was aiming to get across, and that's really useful, thanks. Now we're coming on to the trickier, well, it's not trickier, I think for some people this is the hard part. What does the speaker and audience want to know about what they could work on? Okay, and if you put your responses in chat, I'm going to choose 3 people probably to elaborate on their responses. So responses in chat, what people want to know. So Rose has put down how to improve. Rose has got the how. Just a quick welcome to Mike Diggins, who's joined us. Yeah, Jennifer put down what she would have preferred. Mike's put down purpose and objectives. Amy's put down specific action I can do next time and why this would improve the speech. Thank you, Amy. Alan's put down specific speaking techniques. Were they appropriate for this speech type? That's really interesting. Thank you, Alan. And Mike's put reference to speech type, e.g. storytelling. So what I'm going to do now is, Wendy's put down, I give feedback on structure and delivery. I'm going to ask some people, because we've got plenty of time. I'm going to start by asking Rose to explain her how. Rose, could you unmute yourself, please?
Hi, yes, I found it very important not just to tell me that my hands were moving too much. Give me specific examples. I know I talk with my hands. I know sometimes I feel like sitting on my hands because that's the way I express myself. But give me techniques on how to stop doing it.
I think that's really valuable. Thank you, Rose. And I think everybody would agree. Unless you tell somebody how to make a change, then how are they going to know what to do? It's all very well saying, I don't like the way you wave your hands around, but show me a better way. Jennifer, could you talk about you used the word preferred, what I would have preferred. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Hi.
Hi, Jennifer.
Yeah, so an evaluation is a personal opinion, and I like to bring in that aspect of what I would have liked to be done differently, and without even saying what it was I didn't like, it's giving a suggestion for doing something differently that I would like.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable, and I think that's something we can do far more now with Pathways, because we're going to be looking at later, because we're encouraged to challenge the speaker. But I think you've raised the point that it's the personal opinion that is really important, and you need to emphasize that it is a personal opinion. The receiver of an evaluation is under no obligation to pay any attention to what you say at all. They may completely disagree with you because it's one person's personal opinion. And that's really, really important to emphasize, I think, when you, in the language you use in an evaluation. I think, I believe, I suggest. Alan, you came up with an interesting comment, specific speaking techniques. Could you explain those, please?
Well, when you're evaluating a speech, well, particularly in contest, you don't know what the speaker's objectives are. So you would normally decide whether it was entertaining, informed, inspirational, persuasive. There are very different speech types. Just as a bad example, let's say someone you know is going to die and you have to explain why they're going to die to someone else. If you're going to do that to a child, you would say very different things than you would to a grown-up. So it's the words, the ideas, the techniques, the use of voice, they're all very, very different.
Yeah, I agree. And they are all different. And I think it's also that knowledge of the audience as well. If you know what type of audience the person is delivering to, and we often don't practice this at Toastmasters. Sometimes it'd be a good idea in clubs if you made it clear at the beginning when you delivered your speech that you were delivering it to a specific type of audience rather than just your Toastmaster friends in the room. Say, look, I'm delivering this to a group of 10-year-olds, or I'm delivering this to a member of such and such an organization. And then you can practice, as Alan says, those specific speaking techniques. We often forget that actually knowing the audience very well is going to make a difference to how you present your information. I'm going to ask Mike to explain his reference to speech types. Mike, could you unmute yourself, please?
Thank you, Helen. The two actually tie in together. And it's all about the way that the change in educational system has changed the way in which we look at giving a speech. As an example, the evaluation speech in the first level, give a 5 to 7 minute speech. That's the purpose. But but overlaying that is what used to be in the CO manual, which is the leadership and establishment of objectives. What's this speech going to be about? What message do I want to give? And as you've just said, what audience do I want to work with? Now, if the speaker doesn't tell the evaluator those things and just gives them the evaluation sheet, they'll be just giving a 5 to 7 minute speech. Mm. That's what they'll be evaluating on. However, if, for example, in that same speech, they were to say, I want you to pretend you're an audience at a primary school, and I'm telling you a folktale. Yep. You still do the 5 to 7 minute speech, but now your evaluator has much more to go on in terms of, particularly with storytelling, because you've got your characters, your conflict, your plot, the people at the front and the back of the stage in terms of your characterizations, character separation. You've got all sorts of things that you can just overlay on that straight 5 to 7 minute speech. But if the speaker doesn't tell the evaluator, they'll never know. And this is why you have this emphasis on communication between speaker and Toastmasters to set it up, speaker and evaluator to set up the evaluation for the audience.
Thank you, Mike. Some really useful points there. And I think that begs the question, how many of us regularly contact our speaker and say, come on, what exactly is it? Let's get down to exactly what you're delivering, who you're delivering it to, what type of audience. I suspect the idea with Pathways is for those early speeches is that you're looking at particular general qualities of a speech, such as the use of the voice, the gestures, the body language. But after a while, that becomes pretty mundane in terms of giving an evaluation if that's all you focus on. And it is that richness of finding out what's the audience, what's the purpose, and so on, that allows you as an evaluator to give some really pertinent feedback. I was going to ask Wendy. Wendy gives feedback on structure and delivery. Wendy, could you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Well, as adults, we have very short attention span. So I believe in the structure of any good speech, you should signpost what you're going to talk about. So I always give feedback on how was the introduction? Did I get a sense of what the speech was going to be? And then I go through the normal structure as the conclusion, link back to the introduction, and make sure the speaker knows next time how to even write the speech a little bit more cohesively for the audience. And then, of course, the obvious ones, delivery, eye contact, body language, etc., etc.
Thank you, Wendy. Really, again, really useful ideas there. I don't know about you, but structuring speeches is something that there used to be some really good focus on in terms of the Competent Communication Manual. It seems to be lost somehow in pathways in terms of the material that are presented to people. So it is something that makes a huge difference to the quality of a speech if it's well structured. Again, knowing your audience and having a structure that's going to work that people can easily follow. And that short attention span, again, people these days, we've got very short attention spans because we've been bombarded by so much information competing for our attention, that really a good structure is vital. And Mike Diggins has sent me a private message, which I'm going to share with everybody. Pathways makes too many assumptions about the basics, and I would agree with that personally. Not everybody might, but I actually agree that there are too many assumptions made and there's not enough information, specific information, and Neville and I were talking about this earlier. I'm going to ask Neville now to change to the next slide, please. I put two samples up of evaluation comments. The one on the left-hand side is shorter, the one on the right-hand side is longer. Which of these is more useful, do you think, and why? And they're completely fictitious, but have a read of both of them. And then pop a response in chat about which you think is more useful. Yeah, second one, the longer one. For direct communicators, the left. For supportive, the right. Second one. Second one, why and how. Thank you, Alan. Why and how. Neville, I'm just going to ask you a chance to say something. Can you explain why the second one you think the second one is more useful?
The second one, I believe, is better because not only does it give a suggestion, it tells you how it can be included in your next presentation, but also why it's going to benefit your presentation. It's a bit like being a stand-up comedian. If you just rattle off one-liners left, right, and centre, people aren't going to be able to keep up with you. And the final line says, a good place to pause would have been, and you can give an example of why you think a pause there would have allowed the audience to catch up or to actually give a reaction. In the recent humorous speech contests that I've judged at, a number of people kept talking while people were laughing, which tends to lose the effect of what they're saying. So that's my 2 cents worth on why I believe the second one is the more beneficial to the speaker.
Thank you, Neville. And I think everybody would probably agree that the second one includes the why and the how. We hear a lot of what's in evaluation, what worked, what didn't work, but we often don't get that depth. We sometimes get the how we could improve, but we don't get the why. And if you understand the why something worked and the why something didn't, it makes a huge difference to having something to take away and work on, because you know these sorts of impact that those things can have. Neville, could we have the next slide, please?
Helen, can I just comment on...
Absolutely. Sorry, who's that speaking? I can't...
It's Mike.
Mike, sorry, Mike.
That's all right. With something like that, when you're talking about people speaking too quickly, and in an informative speech, for example, firing too many points out for the audience to absorb, I always look to ask them to consider their content, not as well as their pace, because they're trying to cram too much in. It's something that most novice speakers and quite a few experienced ones do. So if just pulling that in as part of the why, that look to your content, do you really need everything that you put in that speech? And it starts them on a track, hopefully to deliver more effective speeches. Thank you.
That's really good, Mike. And we'll be looking at a bit more about the why and types of speeches. Here we go. Thank you. Why? For me, the why is crucial. I think it's all very well somebody telling you something and how to change it. But this is my 3-year-old response. I can't remember that far ago, but you know what 3-year-olds are always asking? Why? You tell them something, why? Why? And after a while with a 3-year-old, it becomes really annoying, well, it does for me anyway, but it's a way of finding out and putting things into context and understanding. And we're not very good in evaluating people and explaining the why that worked, why it didn't work. Mike made a really valuable point, and Mike, you raise an issue which, I don't know, I've heard people say that Toastmasters shouldn't comment on content, which intrigues me, because why would you bother speaking if it wasn't about delivering content? Does anybody have any views on that? Because I have heard several people say, you don't comment on people's content. Does anybody want to say anything? If you put your hand up, I can see you in participants. Mike's raised his hand on the screen. Okay, Mike, have a go.
I'm very predictable. It's not the content that I'd be commenting on, it's the amount of content.
Okay.
And I would encourage, particularly with a virtual meeting, for the speaker to record it. And can they follow what they've said? That is the key thing, because if you can't follow what you've said, how do you expect the audience to? Because you've got too much in it.
Okay, so I've got 2 hands up in participants. Amy, would you like to explain your views on content?
I think the origin of that opinion must have come from advice not to get into a debate with the person you're speaking about their speech topic. If they give a religious speech and you're not religious, it's not time to get into a debate around religion. But I don't think there's anything wrong with commenting on how the content worked for the purpose of the speech. You can certainly give comments on whether they should have included more content, more examples, different types of content, examples, data, personal stories. Those are all content, but I feel like it's completely valid to comment on those in an evaluation.
Yeah, I think that's really useful. It's having those exemplars. The way you reinforce the content is a really good thing, perhaps sometimes to comment on. Sometimes a speech, if it's purely factual information, can sometimes be, unless you're really obsessed with the information that's being presented, can be tedious. Sometimes you have to find ways of making that information accessible through anecdotes, examples, and so on. And so to give that feedback to a speaker can be really useful. Alan's got his hand up as well. Alan, would you like to share your ideas?
Well, if you're going to make a point, you support it with evidence. What if the evidence doesn't actually support the point you're making? And going on from that, there's something I've seen in contest speeches a long time ago, was something I call a logic bomb. Something that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And you're trying to then after to decide, why was that there and what did it mean? At which point you've missed the last minute of the speech. I'm going to give you a bad example from a speech that wasn't in Toastmasters. It was in the middle of the speech and the woman suddenly dropped in, "Did you know it never rained before the Great Flood?" And then she moved on to the next point. And I'm sitting there thinking, never thought about that. Might be true, might not be true. Didn't relate in any way to the speech. I don't know what she said for the next 5 minutes because I was trying to work out why the hell she said it.
That's a really good example. Yeah, sometimes there's something completely incongruous pops up and your mind wanders and you start thinking, where on earth did that come from? And as you say, you've missed it. Thank you, Alan. But you're right. Those are the sorts of things you need to listen out for, and it's worth feeding back to the speaker because they may not realize that they've done it, and they may have some ideas about it, but don't expand on those ideas later on, leaving everybody feeling very vague about it. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to ask Neville to change to the next slide. This is an interesting one. How might you challenge a speaker? Because challenges have become something important in Pathways. We talk about what works well. we talk about what worked didn't well, but we're encouraged to challenge a speaker. And a lot of people really don't fully understand how to challenge somebody. What sorts of things could you do to challenge a speaker in an evaluation? If you can pop responses in chat, please. Yep, next time consider. That's Rose. I'm just going to jot this down. Rose, next time consider. Challenging is something that they did not do that you would like to have seen. Ask Mike about that. Jennifer, speak without notes. That's always a challenge, and I think it's a really good one. Mark's put down, I don't know. Good speech, wrong speech type. Alan. Perhaps look at doing. Yep. Good speech, wrong speech type. Alan. We've got some really good suggestions there. So I'm going to ask Jennifer to elaborate on speak without notes.
Yes, notes are something I tend to rely on a lot myself, and a lot of other people do. And I guess it's often a lack of preparation time or a security blanket. And it is, if people are using notes, it is really to challenge them to get away from them, because a speech presented without notes is so much better than a speech with notes.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree. And it is, for some people, like you say, it is a security blanket. It's that crutch for some people, and they just can't, even if it's only a small piece of paper that they stick on a lectern to the side, sometimes they can't let go of that. But I think that's a real challenge for many, many speakers. Lose the notes, and an explanation of why that makes a huge difference to the way the speaker and the speech comes across to the audience. Alan, could you explain your comment? Good speech, wrong speech type.
If the speech was supposed to be, I don't know, inspirational, but it wasn't inspirational, maybe it should have been more persuasive. Maybe it was too informed, but it should have been to persuade. It could have been just to entertain, but they didn't set out with their key objective, their message. What am I trying to do in this speech? What do I want the audience to go away and do afterwards?
I think that's a really good point. If you think the person is aiming to inspire you, but they haven't done that, it might have been better if they've shifted that speech perhaps to a motivational speech type, or just something, excuse me, that was entertaining. Arif, would you like to share your suggestion?
When you see a sign from speaker's speech, you see the sign and you do believe that. For example, I was evaluating one of a member of a blast group. She was writing some stories, and I asked her, recommended her to write these stories as a memory, to keep it for her future babies. It could be a more qualitative, more better thing that she already has done. Like, I'm just challenging her to do more, to do better, to elaborate more.
That's a really good suggestion. Do something they're doing well, perhaps to elaborate on it, or to extend it, or to expand it. And that becomes a real challenge. They've delivered a really, really useful speech for people. It was informative, it was interesting, it grabbed the audience's attention, it gave us a message. Maybe there's one aspect that you can challenge them on to take to a different level, but you will need to explain to people where that level might be. If you just say, I want you to do this, explain why you think it would benefit them. So we've got some really good suggestions there about improving. And now we're almost bang on time. We've got 2 minutes before the break. Is there anything anybody else wants to say before we take a break? Jennifer's put a good one. Enter a contest, speak at a different club. I couldn't agree more, Jennifer. Those are general challenges for speakers, particularly entering a contest, because it's a whole different level of skill, a whole different skill level that you need, and you need to think probably more broadly than delivering at your club. But going to a different club, having a different audience, or speaking outside of Toastmasters, really good challenges for all speakers. And Neil's put evaluate at a different club. Neil, do you want to tell us a little bit about that very quickly?
I've visited many clubs in my years in Toastmasters, and sometimes I've visited clubs where it seems to me I've not seen people outside their particular club, and it becomes people are speaking and people are only evaluating the same speakers all the time, and people don't grow. So to grow, they've got to get out and they've got to hear different speakers, and they've also got to evaluate different speakers, and visiting clubs, contests are the ways of doing that. And so a lot of people are not taking up these opportunities. I'm not sure what we have to do to put a lot of fire under their butts, but it's something that we have to do to get people to grow.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think if you want to improve as an evaluator, you need to evaluate, and you don't need to evaluate just at your club because it's very narrow. We've got the opportunity now, whether people want to take it or not, to join meetings online. And you see so many different types of speech, and you learn so much from different speakers around the world. I evaluated at a club in the UK a few weeks ago. Very different style of speaking, completely different. And I'm English, and I kind of thought I was used to it, but I've been away there for a long time. But it was very different to New Zealand. And again, you're getting a vast range of experience, and go to clubs in different parts of the world. But you're right, how do you encourage people to do that? I think perhaps you have to, I don't know, get them along to a meeting, say, look, I'm going to this meeting, will you come as well, so that they see a friendly face on the screen. I know time zones are an issue. Rose has put down, have a galloping gavel. One club's members visits another and provides a speaker, evaluator and GE. And it doesn't matter whether you start small in your own area or whether you just go to some other club in another part of the world. I think the guarantee is that you'll be made welcome. And if you can get a role, it will be fantastic, but that's the way you improve. And if you really want to improve, it is for me the only way to get a broad range of experience in different situations. We've got a break now, I think, Neville, if we have the next slide. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. If you could come back at 10:25, that would help. If not, we'll still have started at 10:25. If you want to stay and chat to people, feel free to do so. I'm going to shrink my PowerPoint and see more faces. But if anybody wants to chat and chat to other people in the room who've given suggestions that they're interested in, just go for it, please.
The other thing, could everyone please put their email address in chat so that I can send out the link to the recording for you to watch and share after the presentation's over.
Neville.
Oops, I went too far.
You've gone too far again.
Could I actually talk to you, Rose?
What have I done?
No, I just heard somebody say about the same people evaluating the same people. And I know you're the chairperson, and I nearly included in my email that I'm going to be evaluating somebody's speech for the 3rd time at the same club. And when I was the general evaluator, I spent the lion's share of my evaluation on that person as the chairperson because he did a really good job. And I nearly put in, could I not evaluate that person? I know. And I noticed somebody else is coming along who is a DTM. And yeah, and I thought, should I suggest I swap? But I didn't do any of that because I didn't want to influence you because you're the chairperson and etc.
Yeah, well, actually, because I've got you Oh, is that in a future meeting, not this week's
No,
meeting?
it's the next meeting. I'm going to be evaluating probably his fourth speech. And
Because I haven't got any evaluators up for the 6th of October. I'm waiting for people to.
well, you put me as number 2 for the person from England. I don't want to sort of disclose.
Yep. I see. Did I
Yeah.
do that? Because I'm just looking up at the moment. I'll tell you what I'll do is there is somebody else. We're either going to have a newbie Toastmaster or we're
Okay.
going to have the area director speaking. So I will swap
Okay,
that around.
good.
How's that? I know how you
Yeah,
feel,
just,
but the problem we have in that situation is that there are now only 6 of us.
yeah, right. I know.
and we're not even a club in good standing as far as I'm aware. We
Oh,
haven't,
how-
because
yeah.
you've got to have 8 members. And that's perhaps something that we can think of as well is
Yeah.
for our evaluation skills is visit a club with low numbers. And we're going to
Yeah.
have to do something to really get our numbers up, because from the first, we're operating as a club that's not in good standing.
Yeah, I know. I sort of understand where you're coming from, but I absolutely love participating. I see it as a fantastic opportunity. And it's, having 5 of us and we all multitask, and the meeting went fantastically well. It's almost like I shine in that kind of small, nucleus rather than a big, huge kind of room. Yeah, but that's just my view.
But
you call it not a club of not good standing. To me it is, because every one of us is actually committed and give of our best, in this small little group. So
yeah, we definitely do, and everybody's trying, and some of us are very trying, but we really need more members, and we need some sort of push.
Yeah.
But with everybody multitasking, it starts to become difficult.
Yes. It changes the character and the formula of Toastmasters, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it might undermine the objectives really, and the growth of the members by having that. But I found it a really great challenge.
Yeah. And I am particularly fond of this club because, first of all, I came into the club and it was low numbers, but everybody was so accepting and so nice. But I have grown personally from this club because of speeches presented by other people. I have learned a different way of looking at economics. I found out about Ruth Raworth, and I have got a completely different point of view on economics.
Yes,
I've become a late onset feminist, and it's really changed my life belonging to this club. And I'd really like to see us get more members and grow, because it's one of the best clubs I've ever belonged to, in my opinion. I see Wendy's back there. Wendy, what can we do to boost our club? We're talking about Sylvia Park at the moment, and we really need a boost.
Yeah. And I hear what Mark's saying about being nice in a small club, but it's actually about sharing the love of Toastmasters and the experience of Toastmasters to more people. You're on a prime location, Rose, with Sylvia Park. You've got so many people and businesses all around you that I'll be marketing as much as possible in the area.
I think that's one of the problems. We've only been meeting since COVID. We've only been meeting online. That's one of the problems. We need to get a venue again. And I have a feeling that 2 of the key people will be leaving the area. So we need somebody that's in the club to be able to market it in the area, to actually go out with pamphlets, to speak to people, to find a venue and start meeting in a venue and perhaps become a hybrid club.
I think hybrid is very successful at the moment, and I personally love being able to jump on one of my club meetings online. It's just so practical, and I can go to more clubs. So I think it's about having a combination of both, but you still can market an online club. If you're still meeting in person, you should be going out, doing open houses online, asking friends to come along, do as much as you can just to spread the experience. But If you probably are looking for a club coach somewhere along the line as well, I'm guessing.
Yes, we have. From what I understand, I'm the VP Ed, and I've been a member for approximately 6 months now. Apparently, coaches have dropped in and out, and that's one of the problems. There hasn't been a continuity of coaches and coaching. Would be great if we could get someone.
One of the things I'm encouraging with the coaches, and we're still developing this, is to actually make sure they start coaching at the executive committee meetings first before moving to the clubs. Just so make sure the groundwork is done with the executive, that you have got a public relations doing the public relations part, VP, everyone knows their roles, and that really helps the foundation for a good quality club. Start there first. So you can do that online. So a club coach can come to the executive meetings on Zoom.
Yep.
And still help the clubs that way.
Yep. Yep. I would well, I can't do it for Sylvia Park. I'm already a member, but I would like to do club coaching in that sort of atmosphere of coming in online, because I'm trying to move more and more to online, because as you get older, you don't know how much longer, for example, you're going to be allowed to have your driver's license, and that people think of 90-year-olds having their driver's license taken away, but you can be in your late 50s and you start having problems with your eyes and things like that, and you end up that you're not as mobile as you used to be. So online to me is my savior.
Yeah, very practical, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know in one of the clubs in the Hutt Valley, Wainui Amata, they have a young lady who's been a Toastmaster for 10 years now, I think it is. She joined Toastmasters when she was 81.
Wow.
And she's still entering contests. She's taken to pathways like a duck to water. I believe, Helen, she's doing a blog at the moment or a podcast.
I'm not sure what she's doing actually, because I saw her on Friday, but I didn't have a chance to chat.
Yeah.
Didn't you win a contest as well recently? Or did she participate?
She won the Club Humorous. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, certainly age is no barrier.
No.
The older end of the spectrum, but it can be a worse barrier at the younger end of the spectrum.
You're too
and
busy.
yet,
the challenge that we have is not gaining members, particularly from that group, but it's getting them to stick.
Yeah.
Pathways came in because the average length of membership had dropped below the point at which they would actually get what Toastmasters had to offer them.
Personally, I believe that if you haven't got someone involved in Toastmasters by the time they're 18, you're going to struggle to get them involved.
I agree. I didn't get involved until I was nearly 50.
Yeah.
I was in my late 40s.
But when you're young, there's more interesting things to do. Let's be honest. I mean, for a lot of young people, it just doesn't seem relevant at the moment. And it is something I think you come to as you get older.
Yeah,
well, we had in Wainui Amata, we had a young lass, her parents wanted her to join. They paid a sub, they brought her along, they dropped her off, they sat in on some of the meetings. We allowed her to participate, and Wendy, can you just block your ears? You're on the top table. She was allowed to participate in the club fully, with the understanding that she could not step outside the club until she turned 18. She turned 18 in the February. In the November, she represented the club at district level.
Yeah, we've done that. Well, Neville.
And then the silly girl, about 2 years later, found out about boys. God.
Come on, Neville, let's be more precise. She found out about a bad boy.
Are you saying we should only recruit lesbians?
No, because they find out about girls, Mike.
That's true. Yeah, they can't win.
Okay, oh, we're ready to start. We've had our 10 minutes, if not more, so I'm going to ask Neville. Somebody new, did somebody join the meeting room a minute ago?
We've Georgie came in. I'll rename her as part of Massey.
Fabulous, thank you. So Neville, could you change to the next slide, please? And we're going to move on to looking a little bit about how you might structure an evaluation. Again, it's personal choice. This tends to be a structure that I use for, well, I use it in the club now, but I certainly use it for contests. And if anybody's competing, you will know that there are some fairly strict requirements if you want to meet the judging criteria. So for me, an evaluation for most people is a speech. It's still a speech. And so there's an introduction, there's a body, and there's a summary or a conclusion at the end, because that's our expectation of a good speech structure. But I tend to focus on one or two areas that worked well straight off after the introduction. And then I look at areas to work on, and that could be one or two. It depends on the detail and the depth, but bearing in mind you've only got 3 minutes for the average evaluation. Sometimes one delivered really succinctly with some good suggestions on how and why is sufficient for a speaker. But then I finish on what worked well the best. I say this to last. Now, it's not everybody's way of doing it, but I think it should be a build-up process. So what worked well, the thing I thought worked really, really well, I save that until last so that you're ending on a real high. A lot of evaluations, people fire away with this worked well, that was great. Then they go through the suggestions on how to improve. And then there's a bit of waffle at the end about something else that worked well, because they know they've kind of got to develop that sandwich. So for me, I think very, very carefully what to save until last. But that's just a suggestion. It doesn't have to be done that way at all. But it is a speech, and people like to have some kind of structure. I'm going to look at the different parts, or there's certainly two parts of this, which is the introduction and the summary. So could we have the next slide, please, Neville? Now, for me, the introduction, just as with a speech, is really important. And I write my introductions last. The reason being that until I've worked out what I'm going to say about what worked well and what didn't work well, but particularly what worked well, I really don't know how I'm going to introduce that until I've got the ideas in my head. And I like to start with some strong adjectives to describe a speech in the introduction. And I'm a great believer in avoiding the words, and I used great properly there, great, fantastic, awesome. Those general words that don't tell us anything about the speech in particular, that specific speech. So what sort of adjectives might you use to describe a speech in your introduction that are going to defeat the great, fantastic, awesome, that are really positive, really descriptive, and really nail what the speech might be about? Think about some words you could use. Yeah, Mike said depends on the speech type. Effective for speeches you feel are to inform. Hilarious if it was humorous. Compelling, flawless. Intriguing was a good one. Insightful. These are all adjectives that tell us more about the speech without using words like great and awesome. Sparkling, that's a nice one, sparkling. So we've got some useful adjectives there. I really think, well, certainly for me, having some strong adjectives in that introduction that sum up the speech that are precise. We've got refreshing. That's a nice one, Mark, because sometimes a speech is refreshing, especially if you've heard similar styles of speech over and over and over, and somebody delivers something from left field that really engages you. So think about, yeah, Mike says you have to use words you're prepared to back up, and you do, because if you're going to use the word refreshing in your introduction, the expectation is that you will talk about why it was refreshing when you're explaining what worked well. And that's why I do my evaluation and my introduction last, because then I can draw out words from what I'm going to say about what worked well. And so that's just a little tip. It's not for everybody. Therapeutic, cathartic, tonic, absolutely. And again, you would use those. Hopefully you will explain why it's therapeutic and cathartic or a tonic when you do the body of your evaluation. So just some suggestions there to help people get a handle on the introduction. Next slide, please, Neville. Right, an evaluation summary. Now, those of you who compete regularly in the evaluation contest will know what a summary is for a contest, but what do you include in an evaluation summary? What sorts of things are helpful? Yes, Neville, a wrap-up of what worked and what could be included next time. Recap, thank you, Rose, good word there. Recap, the what, why, how of commendations and recommendations, but definitely recap. Alan, bullet points of C's and R's. It's a good word there, Alan, bullet points. Mike's got bullet points again. What nailed the speech for you? Rose, very valuable ones. Don't introduce new ideas. And if you do that in a contest, you're probably going to be scored down a bit. But certainly, it is a summary. It's looking at everything that's gone before. So I'm going to ask Neville to explain his wrap-up of what worked well.
Basically, once I've gone through the body of the speech, so that the judges know that I'm wrapping up, I would come up with a suggestion. So what worked well for me today was the vocal variety, the expressive language, and if the speaker considers bringing in blah, blah, then his next speech will be even better, something along those lines. It's much easier to say when you know what you're evaluating too.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm going to ask Rose to explain her bullet points. Was it, I think Rose said, did Rose say bullet points? Rose said recap. Rose, can you just explain the recap, the recap part?
Yeah. You need to reinforce what you have said in the evaluation, but you don't repeat the entire evaluation. Just, I felt that, and just what was good and why. In my opinion, I feel that if Helen were to consider using fewer gestures, then for the recommendations, and then the final commendation, and then thank you for an excellent speech or something to that effect. But just very, very briefly saying what you're saying. It's the same as a speech. You introduce it, you give your body, say what you have to say, and then you say what you said so that they will remember what has been said.
Yeah, thank you. A recap is literally saying what you said. Nothing new. Very succinct and quick, because certainly if you're doing a contest, you often don't have much time for that. But even at club level, it's literally quickly going through what you covered earlier, not repeating it, but just summarising it. And Alan's used the word bullet points. Alan, can you explain your comment, what I'm going to do now after hearing the speech?
Oh, that's a very cynical technique I started using in competitions, but shh, don't tell anyone. If the speech was told me that I had to do something, it's to reinforce I'm actually going to go away and do the thing which I was just told to do. And then,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Whether you are or aren't.
Oh, I always say that I am. I remember a speech a long time ago, and it was about taking a kid fishing. And I said, ask the question, who hasn't taken a kid fishing? I'll give you an example. I've never taken a kid fishing, but I said I did. And no, I never said I did. I said, who hasn't? That was me.
Thank you. That's a really good tip, actually. One thing I'm going to ask people is, I always find that final sentence at the end of an evaluation a tricky one. And a lot of people fall back on the I'm really looking forward to hearing so-and-so's next speech, which I find really kind of kills it for me if you have to put that at the end. I know it's a nice thing to say, but it's one of those phrases that's become overused. What do people do to end their evaluations? What are their sort of final sentence, if you like? Just pop something in chat and let's see what people come up with. Yeah, Mike says it needs to flow from your evaluation and requires sincerity. Absolutely, the sincerity part's really important. Yeah, Alan's what he's just said. Yeah, congratulations. Again, you might refer back to what you said at the beginning, include those adjectives that you used at the beginning, a very informative, persuasive, entertaining speech. Thank you for a powerful speech. I'll go to an opera. Mark, could you explain going to an opera for us?
Yes, well, I gave a speech on seeing an operatic recital in Amsterdam, and the evaluator ended, I've never seen an opera, but maybe I'm going to go. Yeah. Something like that, and I thought, that was fantastic.
No, that's really
after
good.
After the speech, a couple of women came up and said, gosh, we've never been to an opera, but if you've got to describe a soprano like that, I use the word sparkling for these sopranos, you know, in terms of their singing. So that was a great feedback for me. The rest of it, I don't remember.
I think it's really important if you can tie it into something that you said earlier and it's sincere, that you've probably nailed it then, and it just wraps everything up nicely. Neville, could we have the next slide, please? Now, a lot of people, when they start evaluating, and there's a very experienced group in this Zoom room, don't really know how to get a handle on what to evaluate. And this for me is where I think when I'm doing a contest evaluation, you need to get a handle on something really quickly. And it needs to be something a bit different. And so, Neville, could we have the next slide, please? I like to try and work out, well, I do work out pretty quickly in a contest, but also at club level, what purpose has the speech got? If you can work out the purpose, and in a contest you don't necessarily know exactly what the speaker's purpose is, but you assume they've got a purpose from what they're saying, they may be trying to achieve a purpose, that's something to start working around in terms of how you're going to evaluate. As we talked about earlier, in pathways, the last criteria on the evaluation sheet is usually the purpose of the speech. And sometimes this is where you can start if you understand how a speech's purpose might be constructed. So could we have the next, oh no, before that, what sort of purposes do speeches have? If you just pop a few of those suggestions in chat. There's lots of different purposes, but there's some very common ones that we see. Motivate and inspire, absolutely. We see motivational and inspirational speeches. Thank you, Odette. Informative speeches. Inspire, persuade, inform, entertain. Informative research, yep, presenting research. Get any others? Entertaining. One purpose might simply be to tell us a story. That's the purpose of a speech. Just tell a story. And a report. Yep. Alan's put general, inform, inspire, persuade, what exactly you want the audience to do next. So there's a range of different purposes. And when you hear a speech or you read the criteria on the Pathways evaluation form, then you get an idea of perhaps something to hang your evaluation on. Could we have the next slide, please, Neville? Okay, we're going to just, sorry.
Excuse me, Helen, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
The speech types are described in the old CC manual.
Yeah.
Is that actually in, it's not in level 1, but is that in Pathways, described in Pathways?
There are some. And if you do presentation mastery,
I'm just wondering because presentation mastery, whether that material is in there that's come from
it is there. The only thing that presentation mastery doesn't cover, and again it depends on which electives you choose, with presentation mastery you can cover just about everything that was in the CC manual. I would argue that perhaps you're not getting quite as much detail as from those CC projects. The only area that's not covered, and why it's not I don't know, because it's so critical, is the get to the point. Do you remember that third project in the CC manual? Get to the point. There is nothing in presentation mastery that focuses on getting to the point, which is bizarre because I always thought it was one of the most useful speeches for a new speaker. But presentation mastery can, if you choose your electives well, cover everything that was in the CC manual. But it's the only project that does.
Because
only path that does.
Yeah, the point I was making is that one of the projects does describe all speech types.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if that material is in presentation mastery.
Mike says he has to disagree with that. Mike, do you want to tell us why you disagree?
Yes, thank you, Helen. It's because it's the whole thing is fundamental to Pathways. And it's all down to your mentor understanding this, so they can pass it on to you. A speech project has a purpose.
Mm.
That is the basic idea behind it. But the speaker also has objectives. And that purpose is to give a speech, for example. It's the speaker who decides what type of speech, what effects they're going to have on the audience. And until the speaker, until a new member appreciates that because they've been interacting with their mentor to bring that idea on, they won't get very far in Toastmasters. Because every single speech project has got a purpose, and it's got the individual's objectives over the top of that. For instance, I could give a speech, give a 5 to 7 minute speech, the evaluation project says. I can do stand-up comedy if I want to. That's my objective. Can I be funny in front of an audience in a stand-up fashion? Can I tell a folk tale in that? Those are my objectives over the speech's purpose. And looking at that combination, that exactly what the third speech project in the CC was trying to bring out. I think Pathways brings it out in every single project.
Yeah,
okay.
It does, but I'm not sure that it really gets that information out there.
It's up to the mentor.
Yeah, and that's assuming that people have a mentor. I know that at Pathways, people are expected to have a mentor, but it's also relying on the experience of the mentor, which is a whole different argument. So we're going to look at an informative speech. If somebody's giving an informative speech, what do you expect to see or hear in an informative speech? Yep, Rose has put to learn something new, hopefully. Have knowledge reinforced or challenged. That's a good one, Mike. Dates, examples of facts and results. A knowledge base. Thank you, Mark. New information with examples. Thank you. Definitely examples to explain the information. Stats, anecdotes, enough for me to make a decision. Thank you, Alan. New knowledge or a refresher. Review of what's known. Yet that may well be the information. Inform me of something in a way clear. Yet hopefully something I had a reason to be interested in. Inform me of something in a clear way. Okay, so we've covered quite a few of the areas that you'd expect to hear in an informative speech. You probably want facts and information that's been backed up. Mark's put technology, relevant, science, reasons. Yes, you want it to be relevant and you want reasons, and you'd expect that to be accurate. I would assume in an informative speech, you'd expect there to be backup for what the person's saying. For me, I like connectivity between sections. You do in all speeches, but particularly in an informative speech, you want to be led to some kind of conclusion and to be clear connections between the different areas. And Mike says it depends on his communication style as well. So we've covered the areas that you might think about if you're evaluating an informative speech. Those are the sorts of things you might want to get a handle on. Does the speech meet those areas? Or does it not? Is there something in there? Was the factual information perhaps not supported? Were you just given facts and it was hard to absorb them? There's a whole range of areas there, if you know that you're receiving an informative speech, that you could use to build your evaluation around. Mike, can you explain your depends on my communication style?
I can try. For that, I keep coming back to the styles projects in level 2 of Pathways, because I've learned so much from them about, not about my style, but about how to interact with the styles of different people. Now, the legacy program always said, know your audience. Yeah. It tells you why you need to know your audience, because they have different styles from you. They learn in different ways. So it really depends on whether I'm going to pick up from a speaker as an audience member. Will depend on whether their informative style matches my style of absorption, I guess is the best way that I can put it. So if I'm looking for bullet points, I don't want someone to go into long explanations, and vice versa. Yeah. I'm actually vice versa.
I think that's a really good point, Mike. I have to say that in education these days, learning styles seem to be out of fashion. However, I think if a speech has got something in it for everybody, and it may be that you include a variety of styles, which isn't easy, then at least everybody's probably going to get the message in a different way. Now, in a 7-minute speech, that's a big ask. But it may be that if you're giving people information and they need to have something visual, that you do have to include 1 or 2 PowerPoint slides. So you're right, Mike, you need to think about how people are going to absorb. And this means it's quite challenging to present things so that everybody is on board at some point in the speech. It's not easy at all. But yeah, if you know your communication style and how it relates to others, then it makes a huge difference to how they absorb the information. So
Helen, I was just going to ask you about your comment about education puts styles out of is that for education of children, or is it adult education?
No, because I think it's certainly in schools these days. They don't talk about learning styles, and I'm out of the classroom these days, but I know several people have said, oh, we don't talk about learning styles now.
Yes, but school children can't join Toastmasters.
No, I know. But yeah, I'm not quite sure how, I mean, people do learn in different ways, and most people have different ways of, it's not just one way of absorbing information. Most people have various ways. And it's, for adults, it is different. It's definitely different for adults. And that's one of the reasons why I've made this interactive, because people generally like to interact, or they like to solve problems as adults. But learning styles, I like to really go away and look up and see what is in vogue, because it is one of those things, what's in vogue in education these days. But learning styles seem to be going out of favour at the moment. That's all I can say. Could we have the next slide, please? I just want to touch briefly on the scoring that we're encouraged to use in pathways. And a lot of people don't seem to understand, and I'm not saying that's the case in this room at the moment, but don't understand the scoring criteria. If you give a speaker a 3, that means they're accomplished. Okay, that's a real achievement. They've actually accomplished that skill. 4s and 5s, and I see them given to people just because it's the best person at that club, doesn't mean they necessarily do excel or they're exemplary. So I think it's really important to make sure that we're being honest with our scoring, because if you give somebody exemplary, where do they go after that? A lot of new speakers are at levels 1 and 2 in some of those criteria. So think carefully and make sure your club members understand that 3 means accomplished. For many new speakers, it's a score to aim for if we're going to stick with the pathways criteria. And I don't know about you, but my written evaluation is often just some brief notes about the verbal evaluation when I do evaluations at club level. And I'm not 100% keen on some of this pathways scoring. I think it's more important that there's some positive information given to people in the verbal communication, and that information is jotted down quickly in the front cover of the evaluation sheet, but other people may disagree. It's an interesting one. I'm not mad keen on scoring, but other people may be, and it is the system we've been given to use. So just quickly in chat, what are your thoughts on the scoring system? Yeah, Jennifer, I struggle with it too, Jennifer. I think I certainly struggle with the difference between 4 and 5 in terms of the criteria. Mike said it goes to the heart of pathways differences. I'll ask you about that in a minute, Mike. Anybody else got any feedback on the scoring? Yeah, Mark, a beginner can excel in some areas. Absolutely, they can. People who've got a wide range of experience and then come along to Toastmasters can excel. Jennifer's asked, is there anyone here who's any experienced pathways? Odette, I need to look them up every time I need to score myself or others. Yep, scoring's good for direct communicators as long as you comment as well. Yeah, and I think Amy says it's very important that speakers understand how you use the scoring, because 1 and 2 could be interpreted as a fail. And comments are much more important. I agree, the comments are much more important. Neil says he's not a fan and he always uses the side notes. So Mike, I was just going to ask you, could you comment on what you said earlier? It goes to the heart of the pathways differences.
Yes, something that's been very, very clear to me, I always have to go back to it, is that Pathways is based on a corporate learning management system.
Yep.
Right? That's the first thing. And I've got to credit two things for this. One is an educational given by Andrew Pass a couple of years ago, and one is a performance review from Auckland Council of all places. Yes, I used to work there. Please don't throw things unless it's money. And what they do is they ask, instead of the big bashing from the bus that you used to get, they ask 4 questions. Number 1, what are you doing that you're enjoying doing and you would like to do more of? What are you doing? Number 2, what are you doing that you would like to stop doing or use less of? Number 3, what are you not doing that you would like to do? And number 4, the important one, how do we make that happen? those are the 4 elements of the Pathways evaluation form. What did they excel at? What did they obviously enjoy doing because they were good at it? What could they have done less of? What did they not do that would have improved the speech? That's the challenges. And number 4, how do we make that happen? In other words, those are the little pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that make up a good speaker. And if you take it on that way, you're still using CRC, you're still evaluating to comment the objectives, recommend on the objectives, commend, I like to do it, what nailed the speech for you. You're still doing that in the verbal evaluation, the oral evaluation, but in the written one, you're thinking more in the performance review. And I've found that that stimulates discussion between evaluator and speaker to get those 2 in the same place.
Mm.
And that all came from a performance review and just a suggestion that that is the way that Pathways wants us to go.
I think that's really useful, Mike, and actually that's a very valuable way of looking at it. I just wish the terminology was better, because I don't think that the terminology used in the Pathways evaluation form has really nailed that.
No, it's going to be a work in progress. Pathways always has been
a work
in progress.
It will be. It will be. So thank you for that. We've got Amy said, agreed, Mike, just have to make sure members understand that, and absolutely we do. And it's really important that people understand why evaluations are the cornerstone of Pathways and Toastmasters in general. If we didn't have evaluations, we probably wouldn't have an organisation, to be honest, because nobody would ever know what they're doing well and how they can improve and how the club can help them. So that brings me to the end.
Sorry, Helen, my comment was actually replying to Mike's comment in the chat, that replying to my earlier comment that you could interpret 1 or 2 as a fail, and Mike said there is no fail. So I was just agreeing with that, but it's very important to make sure that people understand that and don't interpret your low scores as saying that they're failing.
And I think that's where the discussion comes in behind the scenes with the evaluator and the speaker, because it doesn't matter how you gloss this over. Most people would see 1 and 2 because we're used to scoring. It happens in education. You know, 1 and 2 would be seen as low down, and it doesn't take much to change that thinking to a fail. And you talk to kids in school and they see certain things as a fail. It's this classic phrase that, fail.
Yeah, you've been programmed to see that, Helen.
Yeah, we are. I know. We are. Absolutely, we are. And so we've got to make sure that we encourage people to realise that 1s and 2s are simply a guide, and that it gives you opportunity to grow. So that, as I say, that brings me to the end. The last slide, please, Neville. I'd just like to say a big thank you to people for coming along today. It's been fantastic. Some really experienced Toastmasters in this room, and to share a lot of interesting ideas and commentary. I'd also like to thank Neville, because he's been sitting in the background changing the slides and keeping everything on time with his changes. So thank you, everybody. If you want a copy of the handout I created, I'm just going to pop my email into chat. Email me and I will send something out to you. There's probably nothing in it that you don't already know, those of you who are experienced, but good luck with your evaluations, and hopefully you'll join some other workshops, particularly for District 72. Thanks, Jennifer.
Helen, thank you very much for your time and effort today.
Thank you,
Division really appreciates the effort that you've put in. And I'll just reiterate, of the workshops that we've had so far, today has been the best attendance that we've had so far. We have had an international component. We had 2 from Turkey early on, but at 1:30 in the morning, they decided they needed some sleep. But thank you, Helen, for sharing your
Thanks, Neville.
expertise.
And I'd just like to give a personal thank you to Kath Cherry, who many of you will know, because Kath is my co-facilitator as District 72 trainer. And this is a technique that Kath and I have developed, but particularly Kath, of making Zoom calls interactive, getting people engaged, getting them on board. And we ran all our club leadership training this way, and people really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people still want the face-to-face club leadership training, but I think this was the second best, and I'm pretty committed, although I was quite skeptical when Kath said this is the way we're going to do it. I was quite skeptical, but it works much better with Zoom than putting slides up and just talking at people. I want people engaged. I want them to share their ideas because there's such a wealth of knowledge in the room. Okay, thank you everybody, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Has everyone put their email in the chat so that I can send out the link to the recording and any other information that we need to send out?
Mike, you've said you'll be sharing it with your PQD. Absolutely, that's okay. And just a little tip, if you go to the District 72 website, then there is a district training page on there, and Kath and I put up all our sessions. We've run quite a few recently on online contests and judging. We're moving into, I think we're going to swap, we're moving into mentoring, sessions on mentoring and then evaluations next year. But we are going to run all our CLT for round 2 the same way. And we did have 1 or 2 people from 112 come along, but you're always welcome to join, just as we'd love to know about your workshops as well, because we're still one country, even if we're 2 districts.
Thank you, Helen. I think the issue here is that we are trained by Toastmasters to turn giving reports, which is what the day job expects, into giving speeches. So when we get in front of a training group, that's what we do. Thank you for showing another way. And the reason I would like to pass this on to our PQD is that he can then challenge our people who go to that training to deliver sessions in some way or form and get them thinking out a slightly different way, because with online, you're doing exactly the same stuff. You have to have exactly the same effect, but you will be using different techniques to do it. And this is one of the techniques. Thank you.
Thank you. And Zoom allows so much. I mean, we do a lot of annotation. People write things on the screen or tick things. We've done polls. We've done a whole range of different ways of getting people to interact, because there's nothing worse than just sitting and watching what's on the screen. So thank you, everybody. And I'm shooting out for coffee now, so I will hopefully catch up with some of you later. Thanks again, Neville.
Once again, thank you very much, Helen. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Speak later.
Thanks, Helen. Bye.
And thank you everyone for your attendance today. By the end of tomorrow, I will have sent the link out to everyone once it's converted, and we look forward to seeing you at some more of our Division R workshop that we've got programmed. It was great seeing Alan, Neil and Wendy and Mike in attendance today.
Well, Neil's probably got a comment. This would have been perfect to have it on the district calendar.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, was Helen originally aiming this at District 72?
No, had Division R set up a series of workshops as as Elizabeth has advertised for us, and I ran the first 2 on on pathways, and then thought people don't want to listen to me bleating on, so I got Sandy Hewin to do one on creating speeches.
That was good.
Clifford did the mentoring last week. Helen came in. It's specifically for Division R, but it's open to everyone in District 112.
If we're an international organisation, why are we even considering districts?
I was being selfish.
Yeah, we need to get the word out. We can't force people to come along, but I think we need to expand the word out. And so, Neville, feel free to give Wendy information so she can get it on the calendar.
Yep.
And I mean, you'll get to know the people to push it out to. I mean, you mentioned at the contest, which was great, and obviously, you know, people then had the opportunity. I sent it around to the club, and I had Jennifer come on board. But yeah, it's about getting information out.
Yeah. I hadn't actually realised the range of people that have been turning up. As I said today, we had 2 from Turkey turn up and they would have heard through a Blaze.
Okay.
So, you know, I'm learning. It's the first time I've tried chucking something like this together specifically for our division, and then opening it up to everyone else. Advertising's never been one of my strong points, but I've been.
I believe that. Can I share something?
Yep, away you go, Ivan.
I believe that advertising is one of your strong points because I am from Bulgaria, which is a neighbor country to Turkey. Okay. So, and I found this training by Facebook. And that's why I think that your campaigns are running quite well.
Well, the Facebook part of the advertising is exclusively Elizabeth's forte. Okay. She's set the advert up and pushes it out on a regular basis. I'm just glad that people are getting at least one bit of information that they didn't know beforehand. If everyone benefits in a small way from the workshops that we're putting on, I'm wrapped.
You should be. Ivan, I'm interested. I'd like to ask you what drew you to that specific page out of the billions that you could have looked at?
Actually, I believe that I liked some kind of Toastmasters event on a different topic, and on the right side of the event there is a list of suggested events on a similar topic, again about Toastmasters, about public speaking, and that's how I found this training. To be honest, the first one that I managed to find was the one on let me check. Was the one on constructing your speech.
Yeah.
Some 2 weeks ago or something like this.
Yep.
Yes. And from that moment on, I started checking regularly the next sessions. I remember that the one previous week was about mentoring.
Yep. And we've had 2 on pathways.
Yes, I missed them.
What else would you like to see us present?
Oh, I have never thought about it. That's a good question. maybe I need to think.
Yeah, by all means, I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay.
No, thank you, Neville, and thank you, Ivan. It's an answer that generally generates silence when that question is asked. You don't get a great deal of feedback, and I've done a fair amount of web work for the various districts. And well, okay, what does user-friendly mean to you? It's almost always greeted with silence. And this is another one. So if we can share where we feel the gaps are, it's not just valuable for us, but it's valuable for training as well. Because if we've got gaps and we're motivated to come to this sort of session, then the same gaps are quite possibly going to motivate people to get more out of training. We don't know. We're still learning, as Neil said, but it's at least a start. Thank you.
I know one of the things that the thoughts behind this came out of area R1 and R2. Jess Whitley and I sat down and said, well, I think our areas are a bit weak in these areas, and pathways was one of them. So that was where we started off, and then it's just been the 2 of us deciding well, what do we think people might like? Now it's got to the stage where, what does Ivan want? What does Ellen want us to present? What does Georgie, what does Jennifer want? They need to let us know, and we can put something on. And I do like the 9:30 start, because it means that if people turn up, they want to learn.
Neville, it's sometimes the hardest question to answer. I remember in a work environment, in a technical area, we didn't know what people wanted in terms of presentations around, it was computing related. So we came up with everything we could think of, put it in a list, and then did a survey. And it was very good in giving us a general feel about what areas people wanted to do, and maybe something like that might work. And you can get a general feel with surveys. They can be helpful in that way.
Yeah. One of the things I am looking at putting on is a workshop on free toast. It's so easy for anyone who has no web knowledge to make a very good club website.
But who wants to gain a bit of web knowledge, not in depth, but you will, if you do that, if you make a very good website, you will learn a little bit about web design.
Yeah.
And I can recall by doing a Marta winning the best Free Toast website a few years running.
Well, put it this way. Since I've been up in Waitarere Beach, I've done Speaking of Levins, and last week I did Palmerston North. They had one that hadn't been updated since 2015. And I've just, Easy Speak is a good idea, Jennifer. I'll need to get an expert in on that, because I'm not a fan of Easy Speak. But that's okay. If you can add a picture into a document or add a spreadsheet into a document, you can be a reasonably good Free Toast host administrator.
It helps to know that what underlies what you type into an email is not necessarily, if you change the text of an email address, it doesn't necessarily change the underlying address.
Yeah.
Things like little gotchas like that is where you learn about how the web works.
Yes, I wouldn't mind being on, now I don't know whether it was Elizabeth's or Wendy's group for auditing club websites. Because I've found when I've been trying to get in touch with people through the 0800, for the 0800 number, their websites don't exist. Yet that's what's in Club Finder. So that.
Yes, it's my group, Neville. So I've got work for you.
Make the most of it while I'm retired.
We keep reinventing that wheel.
Yeah, yeah. So
yes,
Easy
battle I've
Speak.
been fighting since 2011.
Okay.
How are you, Georgie? Georgie, you had a comment before. You're going to...
I've sent it to you in chat. What I was going to say actually is, first off, let me explain the reason I've been in and out is because my laptop, which is a work issued laptop, locked me out just after I'd logged into the meeting. And I don't know why, and it won't let me in, so I had to disappear again. And I'm using my tablet, and it's not so easy to type into chat and things. But I was saying that what I wanted to say, Wendy, was that piece about the scoring. I use the scoring a lot in collating my thoughts about how I think someone did. And a while ago, and I've changed how I use it, and I'm going to go back to how I started, because a while ago someone chided me, is a good way of saying, for not scoring people high enough because it made them feel as though they hadn't achieved anything. And I said, it's nothing to do with that at all. I mean, I came to Toastmasters from 20 plus years of judging singing and performance contests, and the system married beautifully in the CRC system. And when I saw the Pathways 1 to 5 scoring system, it was like going back 20 something years to the 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 scoring system that we had in country music and contests. And you never really gave anyone that top couple of scores unless they were like just blew you off the stage with a performance. But people were taught right at the start what the scoring system meant, how the scoring system worked, and in a 1 to 5 system, for instance, what a 1 actually meant, what a 2 actually meant, what a 3 actually meant, and that those would be, depending at the level of speaking or evaluating or whatever they were being judged on, those would be the scores to expect, and not to feel that a 1 meant, oh my God, you were terrible, you know. And I think that's something we've missed in this whole Pathways change of evaluation process, that we haven't actually looked at how that scoring system, what that scoring system actually means, and how people should be using it, not how they are using it. Because so often, not just when I get an evaluation back, but when I see other people's evaluations, they're all 4s and 5s, as though that's an encouragement, and it shouldn't be that way. And after hearing what was said today, I'm really regretting the fact that I allowed myself to be persuaded to go from 2s, 3s and 4s to 3s, 4s and 5s, and I'm going to go back. So if for nothing else, this has been a really valuable workshop for me. But also, all you guys, you're such great heads. You know, you've got so much experience. There's 1,000 years of experience here. And
calm down, woman, calm down.
well, there's at least 100 in the room at the moment.
You're about right.
That's a little bit better.
Just having that interactive format where people can put their opinions up and people can say, well, this is what I've done and it's worked really well, or this is what someone else has done and these are the results we saw from it. It's a bit like when they were explaining about in an evaluation, not only saying you should, but the why. And that's what I got out of today, was so many times it was the why of something, which helped me understand it so much better.
A lot of people are using that numerical part of the evaluation form. They're just putting the numerical part in.
Yeah.
And yes,
but they're not thinking about
if you give me a 1, it's obviously a fail. But if you explain why in the comment section, that 1 can actually make me feel quite good, because it's an area that I know I have to improve on, not that I've failed.
My take on it, though, and it comes back to what I said earlier about Pathways being based on a corporate learning system. We've always got to come back down to that in the way that Pathways do things, or does things, because it's put together by one of the best learning management systems providers in the world, Cornerstone On Demand. If you look for learning management systems, it will direct to that company. And that's who did it. Now, we've modified it for our social not-for-profit organization, and that's a work in progress. But my take on it is that if it's 4 or 5, for that aspect of the presentation, then it's not something that you should be worried about, something you should be proud of, and but it's not saying that there's nothing you can do to improve it. If it's a 1 or 2, we need to talk. That's all that it is. For me, it's a way of stimulating that conversation. Those who were Pathways guides back in the back before we put it together, which is a few of us, always that question and answer list, the emphasis was on talking with your evaluator, talking with your mentor, talking with your VP Ed. About half the questions, that was the answer. So not scores of 1 or 2, just emphasize that there needs to be a conversation. That's it.
I know the evaluations are completely different to when you judge in a contest, but I ran a judging workshop a number of years ago when I was Division J governor in '72, and we actually had 3 speeches and people have judged them, and then we just had to explain why we gave the marks that we did for the various segments. And 2 or 3 of the newbies had given people 95, 96, 97 marks out of 100 for the first speaker. And as I said, okay, was the first speaker the best? Well, no, not really. Well, where do you go if you give such high marks? And it's similar with an evaluation. You've got to be careful on the markings and the comments you make, because it can either put you in a corner with no escape, or you've bagged the person badly. Probably one of the best evaluations I've ever done would have failed in an evaluation contest. There was a very experienced Toastmaster in Batoni Toastmasters, and it wasn't Dennis McCord. He gave a speech. He rammed his agnostic beliefs down the throats of the audience. 3 people bailed him up at the break and ripped him to pieces. He was thick-skinned and probably like Donald Trump. When I got up to give the evaluation, Francis Chandrahasan said to me, "This should be good." I was able to step back from the presentation or from the content and evaluate the presentation itself. And believe me, it was a very, very good presentation. I went commend, 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 and finished with a recommendation that perhaps the next speech should be on a less contentious topic.
He was speaking under fire, I take it?
No, he was actually doing a CC speech. He'd got lazy in his old age. He's no longer in Toastmasters, but...
I'm heading off now, guys. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your attendance. Oh, before we go, I must do this.